Craziest thing I've heard in a long time.
Hello, Gordon.
Tell me what happened on Christmas 22 years ago in Lowell.
You can hear me.
Wendy, can you forgive me? Gordy, I need you to open your eyes now.
I am fucking awake!
Do it, Gordon.
What are you doing?
I am so sorry. I am so lonely here.
Do it, Gordon. Do it now. Hello, Doc. Do it, Gordon.
Can you forgive me?
And where do you live, Simon?
I live in the weak and the wounded. Doc.
This is Devin Sauer, and you're listening to Hysteria Continues.
And indeed you are. Welcome back to the Hysteria Continues, episode 259. We were introduced there by Devin Sauer. Thank you to Jenny Hall Cameron, who got slightly, probably bemused Devon to say the welcome in the show. She was recently at one of the horror cons, which again we've always talked about going to. And maybe one day when we're all rich and famous, then maybe you could all meet at one of those horror cons. But have you, Joseph and Nathan, have you been to any recently? Well, Joseph, go first. No, not post COVID then.
I haven't been to one since 2011, I believe it is.
The time flies. So, well, thank you, Jenny. Anyway, that was, it was a nice surprise to wake up to, and it looks like you had a lot of fun. She was cosplaying there as Casey Becker from the Scream movies. So a great look. So, but this time we are off to the psychiatric hospital. An abandoned one at that in session 9, which is a very creepy movie, which kind of squeaks through in the last 20 minutes. It's a slasher movie, doesn't it? Nathan, this is your pick, isn't it? So you're looking forward to talking about it?
I am. And yeah, upon rewatching it last night, I'm like, okay, so yeah, it's very tenuous for me to fit this into the main show, but I decided to do it anyway.
Oh, why not? It's a great movie, so looking forward to talking about it. But how are you doing, Nathan, anyway? Are you doing okay?
I'm doing well, yes. I'm awake, so, that's good.
That's a bonus, isn't it? And how's your menagerie?
What's that?
Your menagerie of animals.
Oh, they're doing very well.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear.
None of them are in here today, so that's good.
Ah, so we won't hear Boomer's famous sort of... Shake.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't hear that today.
Excellent. And Erik, how about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I've got no menageries. I have lingerie.
Are you wearing it at the moment?
Yeah, just for you.
What colour have you got on, Erik?
Pink.
Pink. Is it lacy?
Yeah.
Ah.
Very sexy.
Or are your black hairs poking through?
Just.
Inquiring minds don't want to know. So, Joseph, how are you doing and how's your menagerie?
Menage a trois.
Oh, excellent. Just say my menagerie are doing very well at the moment. They're all asleep or sunbathing at the moment. Or one of my the fat cats, Tiger's got a big bare butt at the moment. He looks like a baboon because he's licked all his fur off. So we've bought a very, 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 very expensive flea collar for him. So hopefully he'll grow back. Otherwise, he's going to be like one of those kind of Sphinx cats you get with no hair. So he's going to be like that, except a supersized version. So anyway, we'll get on to session 9 a little bit later as our main bit. But let's have a quick chat about what we've been watching recently. So Erik, would you like to go first?
Yeah, the only thing I watched was one that you kind of watched before, Justin. It's X. And I know Joseph has watched this one as well, which is the new Ty West film. And I really enjoyed it. It's set in 1979, and I think it sort of captures that era quite well. It's, as you know, a group of adult filmmakers rent a property on this farmland to shoot their latest movie, which I think is called The Farmer. I thought one of the great things was the lead actress, she looks very 1979 because she has her eyebrows shaved and she's got blue eyeshadow on. So she looks kind of like Agneta from ABBA if she was doing a porn movie. You know, the Ty West is notorious for having a real sort of slow build up to his movies. If you think of House of the Devil, which is a film that is kind of 80 minutes of build up and then 5 minutes of payoff at the end, which, depending on what mood I'm in, I kind of like, but sometimes it can be a bit tiresome. I couldn't really get into the Innkeepers at all. This one I was more on board with because the build up is really quite interesting. The characters are you know, watchable, and you know, the setup is kind of fun, and the mayhem or the horror starts fairly early on in the film by Ty West standards, so you're not left waiting forever and ever and ever for something to, you know, horrific to happen. But even before that, as I said, that just watching this sort of troupe of adult filmmakers and the mysterious strangers that the mysterious farm owners that we meet as well, they're kind of interesting, although it's kind of odd that they have two actors in old age makeup playing the elderly characters. It's pretty obvious from the start. I'm not sure if it's meant to be obvious, but it just does look a bit strange. But overall, a thumbs up from me for X. I did really enjoy it. I was expecting maybe to have to sit there and wait a while for something to happen, but thankfully the pacing in this one is a lot faster by Ty West standards, I thought. What did you think of it, Joseph? Yeah,
like you, I'm lukewarm at best on the usual Ty West affair, but I have to say I really loved X. The setup is pure Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with this group of pornographers going to this farm to shoot their latest wad, as it were. And let's just say they run into some trouble with a little old lady who really wants to fuck. I thought this had a great setup that really lets the characters breathe and endear themselves to you. And once we get to the central threat portion of the film, it kicks into a gear opposite of the usual Ty West film, and it turns into an out-and-out slasher film. It has some really inventive kills and a sort of Tobe Hooper Eaten Alive-esque kind of look and feel. And as the film is set in 1979, I think West goes to great lengths to look the period, and he does a fantastic job. I mean, I really believe this was 1979. The characters, for me, is where the film absolutely shines, and I didn't want to lose a single one of them. I loved these characters. Mia Goth, whose performance, shall we say, goes into double overtime. I think she's a wonderful presence, and I thought Kid Cudi, as the film's stud, was extremely laid back and likable. My only complaint is that they sort of waste Jenna Ortega in a role that suggests something we're ultimately not really privy to. But I don't know. I think that's a small nag for what I thought was a fantastic love letter to the slasher film of yore. And I'm looking forward to the upcoming prequel, Pearl, way more than I am Halloween Ends or Scream 6. I loved X. I thought it was fantastic.
I thought it evoked kind of a Quentin Tarantino feel in the same way that he sort of captures eras quite well like that. I agree with you about the characters.
I could see that Tarantino comparison there. Yeah.
I agree with you about the characters though, because I definitely was, as characters were being killed, I was like, oh, which is not often that would happen in a recent film. I am very much looking forward to the prequel as well. I don't know if is the prequel going to be the prequel's about the old folks, isn't it? I assume. Yeah.
Mia Goth will be back, so.
Mia Goth. That's what Justin says when he's pretending to be Tarzan or something. Mia Goth.
Looking in the mirror. Mia Goth.
Nathan, have you seen it yet?
Yes, I did. And like you guys, I really liked it. I thought it was really well done. I liked all the characters. I especially liked Brittany Snow as Bobby Lynn, I think her name is. I liked her character a lot. The the little old lady killer, like, it's interesting because it's one of those killers that, like, even though she's doing all these horrible things, like, I still kind of feel sorry for her. Because, I mean, I think that she just sees all these young, like, good-looking people, and, you know, like, she just, you know, like, and, you know, she's older, so, you know, she's not anymore. So, I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting. And, yeah, I mean, I liked the movie itself. I thought it was never boring. I thought it was just a lot of, you know, a lot of fun and very well done. And yeah, and I like Ty West's other movies, but I will say, like, they are slow burns, whereas I didn't think this one was at all. Great movie.
Cool. I mean, I haven't rewatched it yet. I'm going to hopefully get around to it this week. And obviously, I've mentioned before that I did go to cinema to see it and unfortunately slept through most of it. So, which is no reflection on the film. It was more a reflection on the big roast dinner I had and a glass of red wine. So I'm looking forward to rewatching it. Although I do really like The Innkeepers. I'm a big fan of that movie. Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing that. So, anything else, Erik?
No, that was it. I've just been catching up on our 2001 films, I think, which is our next on our Patreon top 3.
Yes, I've been I've been doing the same actually, and I've kind of I won't, like last time, mention which ones we're choosing. So, Joseph, how about you? What have you been watching?
Just X. I mean, that's it.
Okay, no problem. Nathan, anything else that caught your eye?
Just X.
Oh, it's going to be a short show.
So that's triple X so far.
Yeah. Well, I did. I because we're covering Train to Busan on the Patreon at some point this month, and so I ended up watching a film that I hadn't seen before called Flight of the Living Dead, which is basically like snakes on a plane. It's kind of zombies on a plane, which I had a lot of fun with. It's really silly and over the top, but just enough of a budget to give it a kind of a sheen, but also some quite lo-fi special effects give it a slightly kind of wacky look to it as well. And it's exactly what you imagine like zombies on a plane would be. But I did appreciate they had a nun on the plane as well, which obviously a nod to the nuns that are usually on airport or airplane style disaster movies. So has anyone seen Flight of the Living Dead? I can imagine this one would be up your alley, Nathan.
It definitely would be. So I haven't seen it, but yes, this sounds like a movie that I would absolutely adore.
Yeah, well, if you want to see a nun having her feet chewed off, then this is the film for you.
Nathan's always gone on about that.
I was going to ask actually, just you haven't seen it, Joseph, have you?
No, I've not.
No. Well, talking of nuns and nunsploitation, I was going to ask Erik, is that an area of film that you've dipped your toe into? I know you like your
I've seen a few, but I wouldn't be an expert.
Well, only because obviously we know you like your I was going to say your nudie ladies, but you know your ladies,
sweary ladies, sweary stroppy ladies,
possessed stroppy ladies doing unmentionable things with communion wafers, yeah, because it's a friend of ours wants to watch a nunsploitation movie. It's his birthday. It's my birthday coming up. So he actually picked Bloody Birthday as the film he wants to watch, which, of course...
There's no nuns in that.
No, there's no nuns in that. But I was going to say it's a film that obviously we've done a commentary for, haven't we? Did we do a commentary or was it just me?
On Bloody Birthday.
I think we did.
Okay. But yeah, I was looking for like a best of nunsploitation movie because I obviously want a really trashy one along the lines of... all the kind of naked werewolf woman and that Magdalena, the Sexorcist, all those kind of movies. Something with filthy dialogue and lots of eye rolling. So apparently Bruno Mattei has made a few like The Other Hell. I
prefer the ones like the Antichrist, which is also known as The Tempter, and as you know, Werewolf Woman and all those.
Yeah, well, I'm going to see. I did find one that looked really funny on a clip on YouTube for one of the Bruno Mattei, one of his movies. Maybe it wasn't The Other Hell; it was the other one he did. Looks like it might be quite hilarious. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be celebrating my birthday with, a bit of nunsploitation. So anyway, completely off topic, but going from the ridiculous to the sublime, I guess. Session 9.
It looms up out of the woods like a dormant beast. Grand, imposing, abandoned, and deteriorating, the Danvers State Mental Hospital, closed down for 15 years, is about to receive 5 new visitors. Donning protective gear, the men of the Hazard Elimination Company venture into the eerily vast and vacant asylum. It's filled with an evil and mysterious past. Rampant patient abuse, medieval medical procedures, and rumors of demonic possession are some of the many dark secrets the hospital holds. But then so do each of the men. Session 9 is one that I really love. I think that the asylum itself is terrifying. The voice of Simon, I think, is very scary. I love the scene where Gordon is looking at the wheelchair at the end of the hallway. And he hears Simon, just say, "Hello, Gordon." Yeah, I think that was really awesome. I think the tapes that are being listened to are really scary. The movie does a good job of utilizing its setting. It just, it does a great job of making you feel like that fear. There's a great scene towards the end that, the generator dies, and one of the characters who's terrified of the dark, like the lights are like going out behind him as he's trying to run and stay in the light. And I'm like, that was a great moment. The movie, I guess, is kind of a whodunit, but there's not a lot of suspects. It's mainly a reason of why, I guess, is more how I felt about it. But I think that everything from the music to just everything about the film, I think, is just very eerie. It's very unsettling. I know we'll spoil it, so I'll let us do that a little bit later. But I think the ending is fantastic too. It's just it's great movie. I would like to start with Erik. What did you think of Session 9?
Okay, well, I was saying this to Joseph when this was picked a few weeks back, that my memories of watching Session 9 back in 2001 or 2002 were that I kind of liked the build-up where it was promising to be kind of a supernatural spook fest, and then I felt that the final moments of the film pointed out that it was not supernatural in any way, that it was just a man gone mad by circumstances. And I felt that was a bit of a letdown. I always prefer, if something's promising to be supernatural, if it stays on that path, because I find ghosts and that type of stuff a bit more spooky and that than just some man who's gone a bit psycho. But Joseph had the complete opposite reaction. Not to preempt your what you're going to say, Joseph, but Joseph said he felt it was a supernatural film. So when I was rewatching it on this occasion, I've enjoyed it a lot more, because I felt there's multiple interpretations of what the finale of the film actually means. Is somebody possessed? Is there an evil spirit in this abandoned asylum, or is it just that this guy has gone insane? You could also read into it at one point that could Gordy, the lead character, possibly, well, this is a spoiler, he turns out to be the killer. Oops, sorry about that. But I was wondering, could he be an ex-patient of the asylum? Because at the start of the film, we hear the sort of the owner of the property saying that people who were in the asylum when it closed down were just let go onto the streets. And I'm just wondering if maybe Gordy was one of them, because he when he goes inside at the start and starts hearing the voices of Simon, he could interpret that as being a memory of his former life. So yeah, there's multiple interpretations of the film. Yeah, so I found it very good in this this time round. I don't really know where I was coming from when I watched it first time. I remember feeling disappointed in it, but this time I found it a very satisfying film. The one thing that watching it this time was, now I'm not a medical expert, but the one character receives a lobotomy, and then he reappears on occasions throughout the film, still alive but acting a bit weird. And I was kind of wondering, are they seeing a ghost of him, or is this exactly how a lobotomized patient would work? I wouldn't really know. But he still seems to be able to function to a degree. He's able to walk around and utter some words. My favorite scene is when Hank goes back to try and get the treasure that he finds, the coins that he finds coming out of the wall. And we see him being stalked, and you see a mysterious figure in the shadows. I thought that was really, really creepy. The guy's mullet was fantastic. He looked a bit like, is it Donnie from New Kids on the Block with that mullet? I'm not sure if mullets were in vogue in 2001. I'm sure they would have been out of fashion at that stage. I'm not sure. There's also a moment actually involving that guy where Mike, Jeff is his name. Mike says to him, "Put your mask on, princess," and then it's implied that he hasn't said that. It perhaps is the ghostly voice of Mary or Simon or somebody like that. I thought that there's lots of things littered throughout the film that I thought were really quite clever just to make the whole film, once you look back on it, kind of ambiguous as to what was actually going on. I like that the crew complain about how much work they have to do. They have to clear the asbestos from this place in a week, I think it is, and yet we never actually see them doing any work. They just sit around, they eat sandwiches.
That's what I was going to say. It's like they have a week to pull this off, and like they're always just sitting around doing nothing, or just arguing with one another.
Arguing with one another, eating sandwiches, listening to the tapes that they find. You know, that asbestos is not going to clear away itself. But no, as for its slasher film credentials, yeah, I think it doesn't really qualify as a slasher for me. Very ish, I would say. But I'm glad you chose it, because it was well worth revisiting. I'm glad I got the second opportunity to watch it, because it really did pay off this time. So yeah, thumbs up from me, Nathan.
Awesome. I do think it'd be fun after we're all telling our opinion to discuss the ending, because like you said, it's very open to some interpretation. Joseph, what are your thoughts on Session 9?
Yeah, I first saw Session 9 around the time it came out, and I knew nothing about it. I mean, this was literally a case of me reading the back of the box at the video store, and, so I watched it, and I absolutely loved it. It was the type of movie that made my skin crawl with its mood, and having watched it again recently, I can safely say that my opinion hasn't changed. Though this show has given me the uncanny ability to see the cracks in almost any facade or film. And Session 9's biggest is a rather animated performance from David Caruso. To be clear, I don't think he's bad here. I just think for the material, he plays things in this sort of... It feels like he gestures too much. I mean, he's always moving his hands and twitching his head and facial expressions with every other word, and it's totally distracting. I mean, he feels like he's in a different movie at times. But otherwise, I think Session 9 is magnificent and moody and atmospheric, and with gorgeous digital photography. And wow, the Danvers building is absolutely terrifying. I mean, for me though, the film's use of sound design is where it's at. I mean, you get just the briefest hints of like a tinkling piano in like an off key or a few plucks of a violin string. But for the most part, the film relies on voices to paint like its eerie picture. And boy, those sessions with Mary Hobbs and her personalities are, they're bone freezing. I was talking about David Caruso, but I think Peter Mullen gets little credit for a really fantastic performance of a man. He plays Gordon. He's a man who's absolutely broken and checked out. I mean, he's such a put upon kind of despondent sad sack that when he begins to shift late in the game, it's a real contrast. And I think Mullen handles it seamlessly. He's a very underrated actor. Is this a slasher movie? No. You could argue adjacent with that late in the game body count, but for the most part, this is more or less I guess you'd call it a psychological horror film, though I would say that it obviously leans more on the possession shtick, if those tapes and that disembodied voice are to be trusted. And the Simon, in quotations, character, wow, what a creepy presence. And the sheer fact that it's just a voice is very impressive. So yeah, wonderful film, truly creepy and foreboding.
Awesome. Justin?
Yeah, I've always really liked this movie. I don't think I saw it at the cinema. I'm not even sure if it got a cinema release in the UK. I can't remember. Do you remember seeing it in cinema, Erik?
No, I got it on DVD when it came out for rental.
Because I think it kind of obviously I'm not going into background at the moment, but it kind of came out in the aftermath, or sort of a couple of years after the Blair Witch Project, and so it is almost like the films after the kind of self-referential films, you know, the Scream series, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and that kind of the kind of self-referential teen horror movies like The Faculty. Had kind of not exactly sputtered out, but maybe didn't have the sheen they did in the sort of mid to late 90s by this point. And I think the Blair Witch Project kind of gave this kind of ushered in this kind of a new era of films that kind of went back to basics as far as kind of like the Val Lewton style scares, as in not showing everything. I've been listening to a podcast on Val Lewton, who, if the name sounds familiar, you may know he did Cat People and The Leopard Man and Isle of the Dead with Boris Karloff back in the 1940s, and The Seventh Victim. And there's a fantastic scene in The Leopard Man where a young girl is sent to get some goods from a store, and she's worried because there's a leopard loose outside, and her mother won't let her back in until she's gone there, and then she's hammering on the door, and she's killed by either a leopard, or it turns out to be someone dressed as a leopard, kind of a serial killer, and you don't see her being murdered, you just hear her being murdered, and it's all implied. But again, although you do see some gore in this movie, a lot of it's going back to that kind of that type of horror movie making, which hadn't been around for a while, which is kind of leaving things up to your own interpretation, not showing you everything. And in fact, actually, you don't, apart from the murder of Larry Fessenden, who kind of turns up, possibly the most unlucky agency worker in all of film history, sort of turns up and dies within literally a minute of turning up into the film. Pretty much everything is kind of off screen. There's very little kind of on screen sort of violence as such, apart from the kind of horrific lobotomy scene with a character having a lobotomy needle or hammer or whatever pulled out of their eye socket, which is kind of always very wince inducing. But I just think it's a remarkable film, especially considering Brad Anderson was doing romantic comedies up to this point. So, you know, for this to come from somebody who arguably I hadn't looked right back into all of his past credits, but somebody who was doing romantic comedy to come into to make such a creepy, scary movie with full of dread. And I think, as Joseph said, I mean, it's got the triple kind of attack of the sound design is quite incredible, and it's got that central motif, that music motif, which is it's almost childlike but kind of creepy. And of course, I think Danvers Hospital was a children's hospital originally, so that gives that extra creepiness. Obviously, the Danvers, the abandoned asylum, and obviously abandoned asylums are always kind of creepy places to do films, but unlike what was it, the Grave Encounters movies, which are kind of, and I think The Haunted Asylum, the more recent Japanese or South Korean movie, where it starts off creepy and then it just goes batshit crazy, and you've got hands coming out the ceiling and ghosts popping up left, right, and centre. And whereas in this, it's the backdrop is just so creepy, and you never actually see anything overtly supernatural in it. There's no kind of hands coming out the walls or eyes appearing, floating in space, or whatever it is. That he never goes for that kind of sort of over the top Jack in the Box style supernatural aspect, and that's what makes it even more chilling. And again, it's so unusual. I mean, I don't think I'm not sure. Is there actually? I'm not sure if there's actually any women. It's kind of, in some ways, it's again a kind of unusual that to have that kind of group of men who are all kind of slightly dysfunctional. But having said that, it actually feels like quite a coherent kind of workforce. Like you actually get the feeling that they've all worked together before. There's history there, which of course you find out some of it's not so pleasant, and there's some jealousy there. But also there's some kind of humour, that kind of workplace humour that it just makes it feel so much more natural and believable. And so you've got that kind of triple threat of the sound design, the location, and of course, like you say, the sessions that they listen to, or one of the characters listens to, are as creepy as the kind of phone calls in the original Black Christmas, I think. And they're quite remarkable how kind of creepy they are. So I think it gets a. I actually do like films that aren't kind of wrapped up in a neat bow, and that someone says at the end it's kind of like it's not like Inspector Poirot or whatever, sort of where he goes and the killer did this and explains it all into a drawing room full of suspects and to the audience themselves. So it's giving you an ending which is open to interpretation, and it's like you say, could be supernatural, might not be, but it's not giving you a definitive answer. And I kind of really like that. I think it's it kind of forces the audience to think a little bit as well, not to be completely spoon-fed. So, I think it's a fantastic movie. In fact, it's kind of strange. I rewatched it this morning. I've watched it kind of on and off over the last 20 years or so. But I kind of didn't want to watch it. Not so much it's not a good film, but I do still find it has a bit of a power to it, a bit kind of unsettling. And so even on a Sunday morning with like blazing sunshine outside, it still has the power to unnerve. And I think that's a sign of a really good horror movie. Certainly one that's trying to go for the kind of the quiet dread of films like the original The Haunting or those kind of movies, rather than a kind of quiet horror. Sort of more like I kind of guess in the same way that I kind of guess it may have inspired people like Ty West and like The Innkeepers. It has that kind of slow build through it to like a kind of shocking finale. So I think it's a fantastic movie. Again, is it a slasher movie? Arguably not. But again, that kind of melody of murders, for want of a better term, at the end, certainly, if you write it down on paper about people being bumped off one by one by an unseen assailant in an abandoned mental asylum, then it's certainly no doom asylum, but it's a fantastic movie. So. Thank you, Nathan, for picking it.
Thank you. I'm glad that you all enjoyed it, because it's not often that you all enjoy a pick of mine.
Well, it's not usual. You pick a good film, Nathan.
How dare you? But I'm glad that you liked it.
Thank you.
Speaking about the ending, I was curious as to what, your guys' interpretation of the ending is. What do you think, Joseph?
Well, I mean, you have to look at the Gordon character and the Simon presence like separately. It's either a film about a man who's completely broken and he's harmed his wife and child and he's completely lost it, or it's about that same man being possessed by an entity who gives him the drive to commit the murder. I tend to lean towards the Simon thing because Gordon clearly hears a voice say, "Hello, Gordon." So if Simon is not a real presence, then I think that would be a cheat. However, you can still look at it at both ways, but I tend to lean more towards Simon being this kind of presence that was brought in by the Mary Hobbs character, and then it just kind of stuck around there until, the weak and wounded Gordon showed up and it got into him.
And Erik, you said that your interpretation is still that Gordon just lost it.
Yeah, I think kind of, yeah. But then if I go down that route, or route as you would say in the States, then that means the tapes have really nothing to do with anything. They're kind of a red herring as such, because Gordon doesn't actually hear the tapes. So
there's another hint in those tapes, because every time the doctor is talking to like Mary or the princess or Billy, he says, "And can you tell me about Simon?" And they're like, "I don't know any Simon." So I think Simon is this separate entity that just got into their minds. So I think that lends credence to Simon being a real presence in this hospital.
What I think, though, Nathan, is that, as I said, Gordy could possibly be an ex-patient. And that would possibly sort of explain how he hears the voices the second he walks in. Because, spoiler alert, we find out at the end that he's killed his wife and daughter because she accidentally spills boiling water on him. But that doesn't happen until after he's spent the first day in the asylum, isn't it? Is it at the end of the first day? I think it's the way the timeline kind of works.
Yeah, because he goes home, he wants to go celebrate with his wife, and he has the roses, and that's when he kind of, the boiling water is spilled on his leg, and then you don't really see or hear what happens until the very end. But my God, I mean, even though we don't really see the baby and the wife, I still felt so sorry for them. I mean, it's so terrible.
It is. So yeah, so I'm wondering if that he's an ex-patient and just something inside him snapped on that first day when he went in to sort of give a quote for the job. But as Justin was saying, it's kind of good the way that the ending is this ambiguous, that there's multiple ways to read into it. But one thing I will say is that the character of Hank, there is no way in hell, regardless of what riches lay within its walls, I would go into an abandoned asylum late at night whilst wearing my headphones listening to music.
I was actually more impressed that Walkman kept playing overnight.
Yeah, have good batteries. Like if I had to go into an abandoned asylum at night, I would not listen to music. I'd have I'd want all my senses so that if any spooks came along, that I'd be prepared.
Well, if you had Toya on, then you wouldn't get haunted by anything, would you? No, nothing would come close to you.
Toya would relax me. Actually, she'd make all the scariness go away with her awesome tunes.
Mm-hmm. I was going to mention, just as an aside, but the character of Mike, when he's telling the story, he's telling the story of Mary, or is it a different one that when he says the hospital got sued?
No, I think it's someone else, isn't it?
It could well be. It's only because I meant to take a note on that, I forgot, because it was saying about the, obviously there was a whole satanic panic in the 80s and lots of lots of people went to prison for kind of, sort of after being accused of satanic abuse, and it turned out a lot of it was just not true and had been coached or been by people. So it was kind of, so he was telling that story about saying how the hospital had ended up being closed, although I presume that was fictional. Although I know when we get into the background, the actual kind of murder of Gordon's wife and daughter was actually based on a real true crime case from some years before. But so I kind of lean, it's difficult to know. I mean, it is open to interpretation, and I haven't actually seen, when I was looking, I haven't seen Brad Anderson actually saying anywhere what his view was, whether or not that he actually thought it was supernatural or not. But it certainly has that kind of feel of something malevolent. In fact, I saw one theory saying it was something, I can't remember, but it's some kind of supernatural explanation for it, some kind of malevolent spirit that was kind of haunted, had left over from the kind of horrible things that would have happened in the asylum, and was kind of waiting for a kind of damaged mind, like a weakened mind like Gordon's, to come in to sort of take over. I mean, either way you look at it, it's still quite chilling, so I would lean towards it having a bit more of a supernatural tinge at the end, rather than just straight ahead kind of murders. But I kind of guess again, it's one of those things. It's like you say, it's not wrapped up in a neat bow. It's it's asking the audience to make their own minds up, which is probably possibly one of the reasons why I think sometimes, because I've shown this film to people over the years. And it's one of my go-to films when people say, I want to see something really, really scary. And so I've shown them this, and they've gone, oh, that wasn't scary at all. And I always find that, I don't know if you guys ever get this, or you people listening at home, when people who aren't big horror film fans say, oh, I can't watch horror films, they're too scary, but they say, show me the scariest movie, and you show it to them what you think is the scariest movie, like Session 9, and they just go, oh, that wasn't scary, just because I guess fear is subjective, isn't it? But I think that people expecting kind of like popcorn horror of the Scream movies or Evil Dead or whatever franchise or films you want to take, is Session 9 doesn't really fit into that box. It's a kind of film that is a kind of it's a certain type of horror movie it doesn't work for everyone. But I think if you give yourself into it, I think it's an incredibly effective horror movie. It has that kind of downbeat sort of feeling of dread that runs through it that other quiet horror movies like Lake Mungo has, or the Blair Witch Project. Those kind of movies that stubbornly refuse to show the gore and jump effects and all those kind of things, but actually just have this kind of throbbing vein of dread running through them, which is incredibly effective. And sometimes you're in the mood for it, and sometimes you want a Scream movie or an Evil Dead movie. But yeah. So anything left to say, Nathan, before we move on to some background?
Well, I was going to say real quick, it's interesting that you mentioned that Session 9 is not a quote-unquote popcorn film, but it kind of, I don't know, I think the characters are they're so interesting, and so they have that group dynamic, and I don't know which one of you said it, but they feel like they have a history. It almost feels kind of like, not popcorny, but you're sitting around with a bunch of pals.
Yeah. I think you know, I do. I think I mentioned that, and it does feel like, I think it's to do with like they have that kind of almost that workplace humor,
that kind of blue collar kind of likability, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, which I think is why what happens to them, it just kind of brings you in because they feel relatable, which is again it's testament to the fantastic writing on the movie as well, to actually, you know, paint a relatively large you know, ensemble cast of characters and actually give them all a kind of quirks and sort of humor and sort of just believability, which I think is kind of often is quite rare, not just in horror movies, but in any kind of movie, you know. So it's kind of testament that they feel like real people, which I think is, you know, why it remains so effective. And especially as I kind of like, you kind of feel like Gordon, the Gordon character, as he just feels kind of vulnerable, or even though he turns out to be the killer, it's kind of like he's just like, what is going on? I don't know what's going on. He just looks confused the whole time. And it's kind of that switcheroo, isn't it? Because his character is almost like the audience is kind of thinking what is going on, and he's the conduit for that we're kind of, through him, we're trying to, what exactly is going on. And he seems so pragmatic and sensible quite often during the movie that you know, that whole switch around at the end, and he's clearly just has no idea. And I did read something that was saying about how it kind of, the other thing that possibly lends itself to him being possessed by the Simon character, this kind of whatever spirit, is that they say sometimes during the end of the way he walks after to kill people, it's almost like almost like a Michael Myers. He's just kind of it's just all business, isn't it? There's no kind of emotion. He's not angry, is he?
Yeah, if you watch the Gordon character, like when he's clearly not like possessed and he's just kind of talking to his coworkers or going home, he walks with a slouch and he's beaten, he's disheveled. But when he could be possessed by Simon, he has that strut and he's like a different person.
No, absolutely, because it's that whole quite classic kind of slasher movie trope, isn't it? Of the kind of like, oh, it's you, or kind of like you're someone, subjective point of view character camera goes towards somebody, and then they kind of, they know.
I was laughing about that. It's because like no one ever says, oh, hey, Gordon. They're like, oh, it's you.
Well, it's the same in all slasher films, isn't it? What are you doing here?
Poor Josh Lucas. I mean, he gets the lobotomy. And my God, that's just so creepy, the way he just kind of lingers around the Danvers building, and he's like, "What are you doing here?"
Does anyone know if that's a realistic portrayal of?
I couldn't tell you that, but I just remember watching this one night, and I'd fallen asleep on the couch, and I woke up just as he says, "What are you doing here?" And it just creeped me out so bad.
I think the lobotomy. I mean, obviously there were lobotomies, and I think there were lobotomies probably at Danvers as well. Actually, the other thing I was going to ask is it? I know it's obviously filmed at Danvers, the asylum, but was it set there?
Yes, they name checked Danvers multiple times.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the lobotomy. I mean, I think it probably is unfortunately quite a accurate portrayal. I mean, it's kind of obviously if the Gordon character had done it, he wouldn't have done it with the same inverted commas care.
Well, this is what I was wondering. Yeah, how would he know what to do?
So it seems like Simon had been in there for a long time, and he'd probably seen these lobotomies while he was possessing someone else, or maybe he was inside of someone who had a lobotomy.
Have you ever been inside someone who's had a lobotomy, Erik?
Multiple times.
Anyway, that joke had to be made. So, background, I guess. Who's got some background for us?
I have some background.
Okay.
Some of the imagery in Brookhaven Hospital was also inspired by Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 3 was inspired by this movie, if that wasn't very clear, because I don't think it was clear the way I was saying it there. The building is apartments now. And that sounds awesome. I want an apartment there. That would be so cool. Yeah, I like that. Filmed during the summer of 2000, was released during the summer a year later. Had a limited release because USA Films actually went bankrupt, and there's not much CG used in the film. The only CG that's actually used is when the lobotomy tool, whatever it's called, it's like pulled out of Josh Lucas's eye, which really I agree that's a very cringe-inducing scene.
Was the mullet? The mullet wasn't CGI, was it?
Yeah, well, they did CGI the bottom part of it, yes. Party in the back, area. Danvers, Massachusetts, the location of the hospital was originally known as Salem Village and was one location for the Salem witch trials in the 1600s. So even more crazy history. Very few sets were built for the film, obviously, because, hey, they got the best set possible right there. Even though they did mention that, like, a lot of teens went there to party and stuff and draw graffiti on the walls. And, yeah, so that happened. But, it is what it is. And, yeah, that's what I've got. I'm curious to see what you guys have. So, Joseph, any background?
No, and I was really looking forward to digging into this film, but I've been so busy this week. It was all I could do to gather my thoughts on the film. Sad face and sorry, but I do want to give a shout out to a couple of the actors. Brendan Sexton, I think the third, he plays the mullet boy. He was in Empire Records as Warren, or My Name Is Not Fucking Warren, and I love that actor. And again, Peter Mullen, he's such a fantastic presence in this film. I was recently watching the show Ozark, and he's in that show, and he's completely unrecognizable. And he's just a fantastic actor. I'm going to have to dig into his filmography. He's a very interesting presence, but unfortunately, no background.
Erik?
Yes, I have some. So apparently Danvers closed its doors for good in 1992, so it was abandoned for about 8 years before they filmed. As you said, some of it was turned into apartments, but a lot of it was demolished in 2007. Apparently there was an additional subplot which didn't make the final cut of the film, where a homeless woman is living in the hospital, and she's sort of watching the crew go about their business, and they don't detect her presence. She's seen like collecting objects and that that they leave behind. And then what happens? She witnesses the murders and becomes scared, and then kills Gordon at the end in retribution. So that was all omitted from the film.
Oh, I'm so glad they cut that out.
Yeah.
Was she meant to be the Mary Hobbs character, do you think?
Oh, interesting. Yes, possibly.
Because they're saying a whole thing about people coming back who've left and stuff. So, I wondered.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's actually probably what that means then. It probably was her.
I'm still glad they cut it out. I'm more interested in the workers.
Justin mentioned about the fact that the Peter Mullen character and his relationship with his wife and child were based on a true case. Yeah, so there's a chap called Richard Rosenthal who directed Halloween 2, but he went mad in the mid-90s. It's not the same Rick Rosenthal. I'm only joking. He was a financial analyst. He was 40 years old, and he got into an argument with his wife about a burnt pasta bake, which it became known as the burnt ziti case. I don't know I've never heard of ziti, but apparently it's like a pasta bake. But they got into an argument because he'd burnt the meal, and he killed her. Not only did he kill her, but he sliced her up and then got some of her inner organs and put them on a stake and put them into the back garden. And then he sort of drove around aimlessly and with his baby, and kind of acted like nothing had happened for a few days before he was caught. And he claimed that his wife was an enemy alien vampire and that she was part of an invasion and he had to stop it. And he also made claims of having interactions with a supernatural dead rat. Needless to say, he went to prison for life in 1996. So that was kind of what inspired the Gordy character. A prequel has been written by Brad Anderson and Steve Gevedon, who's the co-writer of Session 9. So the prequel is called Session 1, and the general gist of the story is it's going to be about Mary Hobbs, who's the character on the tapes, and it'll follow her as a child and that. But as I said, it's written, the script is written, ready to go, but the rights to Session 9 now belong with a film company called Focus Features, and they have the say on whether any sequels or prequels can be made to the film, and they're just not interested in doing one. So they can't go off independently and do it because, as I said, Focus Features have the copyright on it. So yeah, unfortunately, that's in limbo at the moment, because apparently they have a sequel planned as well. So they're going to do a prequel and a sequel. So there was going to be a trilogy of films, but at the moment that's on hold. And finally, just to mention, the actor-director Larry Fassenden appears at the end as Craig in the film. Still don't know if I've ever seen a Larry Fassenden directed film. Are they any good? Anyone?
I've not seen any of his directorial work. The only thing I've ever seen him in was We Are Still Here. But yeah, I just mostly acting from his part.
It's his motif to turn up and be killed, because I know he's the first victim in You're Next, isn't he, as well?
Oh yeah, he's in that as well.
Must be.
Excellent. Okay, is anything else, Erik?
No, that's it.
Well, I think we've covered pretty much everything I had, but I think the only other little bit of extra was the Brad Anderson and Steve Gevedon gave an interview on the 20th anniversary to Fangoria magazine, which is online if you want to look that up. So they talked more about the potential sequel and the prequel, and everything you said, Erik. They're sort of saying that what was really frustrating, according to them, was that they actually had the money set up and the producers. It's just, and they said it wouldn't cost Focus Features any money to do the film. They're just not interested for whatever reason. The film, when it came out, it was it kind of flopped because I think they said that they didn't know what to do with the movie, and I think Brad Anderson said that the person who was either part of the original production company, whoever put it out, had said, who was doing the publicity, he sort of says, "Well, I'm not exactly sure what we've got here." And his heart sunk, and he realised that they wouldn't know what to do with it. So it's a film that kind of didn't have that much impact when it was released, although it did get some pretty good reviews. A couple of clips from reviews here from the time. Susanna Sonberg, the Missoulian, said, "A good thriller should have you desperate to leave, every nerve in your body urging you to get out. Brad Anderson excels in creating a world that is so insanely creepy that you'll echo one character's whimper, 'I want to go home.'" David Germain in the Daily News said, "Session 9 is yet another lesson in Hollywood that a fright film need not be awash with blood and elaborate effects." But he criticised the film for shifting gears in its final kind of the revelation and the kind of bloodshed. He said he would have preferred the film to carry on in that kind of quiet horror way. Jeffrey Anderson, the San Francisco Examiner, said the film's approach was probably the result of the success of Blair Witch Project. He also he said the film gave him tingles, but he said some of the plot holes were jarring. He mentioned some of the character motivations, he said didn't make sense in retrospect. And finally, Jim Beckerman agreed with the comparison to Blair Witch Project. He also said The Sixth Sense, which has obviously been a very, very big hit, and again was a kind of, that kind of start again of that kind of quiet, sort of dread, sort of horror type of films that we hadn't really seen since maybe some of the bigger productions of the early 70s, maybe. And he said atmosphere, not gore, is the point of this truly creepy, low-budget effort. So the film did get some pretty decent reviews when it came out, but it's a film that's kind of grown in stature. And Brad Anderson was he was sort of saying about how it's one of those films that, unlike a lot of films, something like Blair Witch Project, when that came out, obviously that was a huge cause célèbre, and then everyone was talking about it. It was a kind of cultural sort of touchstone, and so there was this. It was kind of it just kind of disappeared very quickly, but found a new audience at home, I kind of guess, through kind of home media. And has, I think I've seen it on Netflix, relatively recently. So it still has an audience there for this type of horror. And it's a shame that Brad Anderson was kind of really wanted to do the sequel and the prequel. And he was even sort of saying about how, how they could actually go back to Danvers and do a film about a haunted condo, which I'm not sure quite how good that would be.
It'd be like Poltergeist 3.
Yes, it would be, wouldn't it? So it was interesting. I was looking at Danvers and saying that the hospital, and obviously it was classic, I say classic in inverted commas, kind of asylum built to treat the kind of the mentally ill in the Victorian times. And again, like many of these places, it was started off with great intentions and with lots of money, and then got worse and worse and worse until it was eventually there was a famous Geraldo. He did a very famous expose of kind of asylums in America, which kind of led to and also I think the Mental Health Act from. Which one of the presidents in the early 80s, Reagan, I think it was, that kind of withdrew a lot of funding from these places, which was very controversial at the time, but essentially emptied the places, which is something they talk about a lot in the film, about how people went back into the community, and sometimes that didn't work and sometimes it did. I think Erik said it kind of stopped operating completely in 1992. And was derelict. And apparently I read somewhere it said over 120 ghost hunters have tried and failed to get into the site back before it was redeveloped. And Brad Anderson and I presume Steve Gevden actually one of the ideas, because I think Brad Anderson was local to this place, and he actually used to drive past Danvers. So the combination of the hospital and the very infamous murder from a few years before was like obviously the chrysalis for the idea behind the story. But he said he spoke to kind of urban explorers, people who had actually got in, and they did break into. I think he says they broke into the thing, and he said one of the creepiest places was the corridor that goes underneath the asylum, where the Brendan Sexton, the third's character, has that incredibly creepy scene where he's running away from the lights going off, which again always felt kind of, that was always my nightmares. But he said they actually went into that thing. He said he'd never been in darkness like it. Literally, they could not see anything at all. It was just completely pitch black. And he said they completely lucked out on the fact that they were allowed to film in there, because again, had security guards stopping anyone getting in there. And he said they would never allow something like that today because of the health and safety implications of filming somewhere like that. And apparently they were told that he could only film in a very small area because a lot of the place was full of asbestos, ironically, and also kind of the floors were giving way. And he said they did go and film in bits they weren't allowed to. But he was very pleased that it still had such a reputation and such a following. So so it should. So okay, I think that's everything that I've got on the film. So what was the reaction to the movie on the Facebook groups, Joseph?
Well, 31 comments for session 9, and Merle O'Kelly writes, one of my absolute favorite creep out picks. It sits alongside the Changeling for slow burn chills that get under your skin and stay there long after the movie is over. Elsewhere, Heathen73 states that session 9 is boring, overrated, and not a slasher. So you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Listen on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and dozens of other podcatchers. If you like the show, consider joining us on Patreon. We're going to have, fan or group commentaries on a lot of good films coming out in August. So check us out over there. If you have any feedback, you can reach us at thehysteriacontinues@gmail.com.
Excellent. And we do have a bit of feedback coming up. But before we do that, talking of something that might drive us all into an asylum.
It's my joke of the week. It's so
Did you hear about the mental patient whose brain was in his arse? He had a lobotomy. His brain was in his arse. He had a lobotomy.
Was it asbestos?
Now you know how it feels, Nathan. The hurt.
The pain.
Yes.
Well, the pain, it's pain for our poor listeners. But thank you, Erik, and thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
So, Nathan, you have some feedback for us.
I do. It says, "Hi, Justin, Nathan, Joseph, and Erik. Hope this email finds you all well. I've been listening to the show for a while now, so I just thought I'd email to say what an amazing job all four of you do and how much joy you're bringing to listeners. You're the perfect quartet, and I hope you'll be continuing for a long time yet. A couple of quick questions to get the discussion juices flowing. It's probably been asked before, but have you guys ever thought about doing a video episode so we can put delicious faces to the names? As we all seem to be living on Teams for work lately, it seems fitting. Perhaps for the upcoming 250th episode. Also, when it comes to slashers, do you think we've seen the last of the new franchises being driven by an iconic main killer? Ghostface seems like the last one to have joined the pantheon of greats such as Freddy, Michael, Jason, but he/she debuted 26 years ago now. It seems there hasn't been a new iconic slasher character introduced in the time since. Is the idea of a Jason-like character now dead, or are studios just scared to try something new, happy just to rehash tried and tested villains from years gone by? And what might a new slasher icon look like these days? Time for a female slasher to join the greats, maybe. Hope all four of you are doing well and can't wait to see what the future holds for THC. Hugs and high fives, Saskia from Cambridge, UK."
Oh, thank you, Saskia. Love to hear from you and from lovely Cambridge as well. So we have discussed doing kind of a video cast, haven't we?
Yeah, we just have way too much to do already, so I just don't think video. And I'm getting older. I don't want to be on camera anymore. I just don't want to.
Well, also,
did you ever?
Not really. I mean, I was entertaining the idea because people asked for it, but honestly, I would have to. I'm not narcissistic, but I'm very insecure about my looks sometimes. So I'd have to spend hours like making myself presentable, and I don't want to do that. It's hard enough to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to prepare for the show. So sorry, we may do something similar in the future, but not right now.
That is one of the other issues, isn't it? Is that Nathan and Joseph record this really early morning Sunday. And it's kind of early afternoon for me and Erik, so that kind of adds that kind of complexity. I can, and also, of course, the other problem is that if you're actually doing a video cast, you've got to look intently like you're concentrating, and obviously there'd just be lots of Erik flicking through bear porn on his phone.
How rude! Sometimes I just look at kittens.
Well, yes. Well, did you see there was international listeners wouldn't have heard about this, but there was in the House of Commons this week.
Yes,
Neil. There was a Tory MP that was done for flicking through porn, watching porn on his mobile phone during a debate, not a mass debate, presumably, but and he said he was looking at videos of tractors, and somehow unwittingly got onto a porn site. So anyway, yeah. And funnily enough, that Tory MP, which I won't mention by name, but I actually I was on TV with him once, which is very strange, for instance. I know. So,
wow.
Yeah, not looking at porn. But, and as far as the kind of the new slashers, I mean, I guess Ghostface is the, there has been ones, hasn't it? Like the Jeepers Creepers.
Victor Crowley.
But again, they're all, they're all kind of, all of them are really, I kind of guess playing off the 80s sort of vibe anyway, weren't they?
And they don't have the same impact as Jason or Michael Myers.
No, I think it's going to be, Scream, I think definitely captured the zeitgeist or whatever for popular culture at the time it came out. And for that brief period during the late 90s when you had obviously, the fisherman character from I Know What You Did Last Summer movies. So you do have that. But now, I don't know, everything seems so fractured, doesn't it?
What about the invisible demon in the Paranormal Activity series?
Possible. It just seems now like I don't know. It's like everything is like being like about a reboot or a remake or kind of a continuation. You don't really have a face to put to that. And I'm trying to think what kind of costume would, accentuate that, because with Ghostface, it was playing on that whole 80s thing of mass killers. So it was appropriate, but now everything's just a reboot. How do you mask that? I don't know.
I think there probably will be somebody will come out with a breakout hit, it's kind of going forward. As much as we love 80s slasher movies, you're thinking how many times can you redo that story? And obviously they're still redoing it. I think they're always going to be, like a new audience who's going to want, to see facsimiles of themselves being murdered on screen. I mean, there's a new one coming out, isn't it? Bodies, 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 which I saw was a kind of a new slash movie is coming out relatively soon. You obviously had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of reboot, quasi sequel. There's been a number. There's one on Facebook, which Netflix. That one. There's someone in the house with the killer making masks of the previous victim. So there's always going to be those twists.
Yeah, the obvious one, X. I mean, we talked about that on Recently Seen.
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know. I don't know is the honest answer. I mean, it just seems to me it's crazy they're not making new Nightmare on Elm Street or especially new Friday the 13th movies.
Well, Saskia mentioned perhaps bringing a female into the foray, and X does that, and X is going to have a prequel. Maybe it'll get a sequel as well. So there's a foot in the door at least.
It's quite old though for if there's a sequel. Like,
Well, I'm saying the prequel would obviously be probably younger, but the sequel, I don't know. But who knows?
Maybe Mrs. Voorhees can come back from the dead. Using Nathan's logic with the Friday the 13th series.
Yeah, I mean, there have been female. I mean, we won't start talking about all the films of female killers, but there has certainly been some post Friday the 13th, isn't there? But again, I don't know. I don't, a kind of, obviously Mrs. Voorhees was only in the first movie. Really, well, she kind of turned up in the sequel on the head on the bench, and in the third one, her head was reattached, wasn't it? So nothing's impossible. Mm-hmm. But
no, I mean, we've already discussed the Mrs. Voorhees thing, and it was an ambulance person that put on her sweater
and then jumped out the lake. Yeah,
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it'd be great to see a kind of a iconic female villain, and maybe there will be one. Maybe that will be the next thing. I mean, I in some ways I was not surprised, but you thought that the perfect opportunity for the Candyman, the first sequel to the original Candyman, would have brought back Virginia Madsen as the killer, but they didn't do that, did they? So, yeah, interesting. But anyway, well, thank you for writing in, Saskia. So I hope you did say we could do something for the episode. Was it episode 250? And I think we're on 259 now. So I don't know how.
Yeah, it's you missed the boat there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how old the feedback is. I hope you're still listening. Anyway, so. Is there any other feedback?
That's it.
Well, I guess that just leaves us to talk about what we're covering next time. And talking actually Friday the 13th Part 3 connections. Not welcoming back Daniel Kimmel onto the show, because I don't think she would necessarily appear on the show, but we are covering a film that we have done a commentary for, but we've never covered on the main show. So that is 1982's Sweet 16. So, and yes, you will hear the Melissa song, Sweet Melissa song.
I love that song.
Yeah, we'll definitely be playing out with that. So anyway, yeah, it's going to be interesting to go back to a film, say we have covered on a commentary, but that was many moons ago. So it's going to be an interesting film with an interesting history and also kind of an interesting cast as well. So. Some interesting backstories to that one. So, and we are being joined, aren't we, by friend of the shows? Is it?
It's Rob Balducci.
Of course, Rob. So, do excuse my getting tongue-tied there, but so that will be a fun one to cover. So join us next time for that. And say we are working on our commentaries for our Patreon, and the first one will be again. The Synchronicity is going to be the original Friday the 13th. So we'll be watching in real time to see whether or not Mrs. Voorhees could have been swapped for an ambulanceman walking past at the last moment. but we shall see. So anyway, you have to join us on Patreon to find out. Okay, right. And what are we playing out with, Nathan?
We are going to play out with the incidental music. I wanted to play out with a song, but I feel it will ruin the impact of the episode, because it's this creepy thing. And I don't know any songs with the session in them.
Any particular bit of music, like the end credits music?
The end credits music. I think it would be a very fitting ending to this creepy
Okay,
episode.
well, I hope you're not listening to it with the lights out, but we will catch you next time on The Hysteria Continues. So say goodbye to the good people.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, Gordon.
Untrained, you never shut up. Needs keep you